welcome to Starting Line Church. My name is Allison. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're just glad that you have joined us for our series called Rhythms. Over the last couple weeks, we've been walking through this series where we've talked about how there are many different important parts to our relationship with Jesus. So many practices, so many rhythms that we need to have in place to grow outside of just Sunday at church. So far, we've talked about rhythms like reading scripture, rest, gathering. And today we get to talk about the fourth one. Rhythm number 4 is giving. Giving. As you know, it's Thanksgiving week, which is so crazy and so exciting, but it's a week where we prepare our hearts to be in the spirit of helping others and giving to others and loving others. So we figured, what better week to talk about the truth that God calls us to be givers than this week. Giving is when we present something voluntarily without expecting anything in return. When you are giving, you are offering, you are donating, you are contributing, you are gifting something. When I think of giving, I think about professional baseball games. The batter, they hit a ball and they hit a foul ball or they hit a home run and somebody goes after and chases the ball or they catch it on the fly. And what I love, one of my favorite moments is that when that individual doesn't keep it, but hands it to somebody else they don't know. And I love that because the person had no reason to do it, no obligation to do it. They gave up the ball even though it meant that they would be walking away with nothing. Here at Starting Line, we use this word giving when it comes to talking about how God has called us to be givers of our time, our energy, our money, our resources. And we talk about this because giving is something that it should be a constant part of our lives. It should be something we do on a regular basis, not something we just do every now and then. So what is giving in this context? What do we mean about this? What do we mean by this, like when it comes to the rhythm of it? Giving is letting something go for the sake of someone else. Giving is letting something go for the sake of someone else. Think about it. When you give something, really, you're letting it go because you could have had it. You could have been in possession of it. When you let something go, it means that you give something up. You hand it over. You say goodbye to it in some way, shape, or form. So giving is the act of letting something go for the sake of helping, caring for, supporting someone else. And so really what that means is that in giving, we're actually letting something go that once was ours, thinking about someone else's needs, feelings, thoughts, desires. The baseball game is a perfect example of that. We're going to spend time looking at a story in the book of Mark. Mark is in the New Testament, and it's one of the Gospels. This means that Mark is one of the books of the Bible that documents and records the life of Jesus when he was here on earth. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 41, where we see Jesus at the temple. Now, just before this, what we read today, Jesus is teaching at the temple, and he is condemning those who at this time were exploiting widows and taking advantage of them financially. And then right after that, we see Jesus approach, in this moment, the collection box at the temple, which is the place where people would come and place their financial offerings and gifts to God. And what Jesus observes when he's standing there causes an interesting conversation with him and his disciples that speaks to the true nature of giving. Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 41. Jesus sat down near the collection box in the temple and watched as the crowds dropped in their money. Many rich people put in large amounts. Then a poor widow came and dropped in 2 small coins. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they give a tiny part of their surplus. But she, poor as she is, has given everything she had to live on. So Jesus, he's there, and while he's there, he's watching what everyone is putting in, and he notices that the rich people are giving large amounts of money, and they're looking for all kinds of praise because of it. And then in contrast to that behavior, he observes that this woman, who was a widow, gives these 2 small coins. It was this tiny sum of money that equaled pennies. Change that nobody would even care about, but it was all she had. And in this moment, Jesus argues that this widow had given more than all the others combined. With the disciples, he uses this moment then at the temple as an example, as a lesson on the act of giving and what it should be, what it should look like. So what can we learn from this? Number 1, it matters how we give, not how much we give. It matters how we give, not how much we give. In our story, this woman took a posture of giving that stood out from everyone else at the temple that day. And we see Jesus' response to it. He tells his disciples, hey, this woman gave more than all the others. Now, practically and realistically, we know that's not true, right? We know the amount was not at all the most that was given. We read that she gave 2 pennies. She gave close to nothing. So what is Jesus talking about here? He's talking about the fact that he cared more about the motivation for the giving rather than the amount given. All the rich people, they came in and they gave all kinds of money, way more than the widow. But they did it to feel good about themselves and to receive praise and glory from the world. They did it because of how it would make them look and how they would be perceived. They didn't do it for the right reasons. They didn't do it because God actually just called them to be generous people. But then this woman comes along and she takes this posture of humility, and because of it, her heart and her motives actually shine through for all to see. This woman knew she was supposed to just give back to God what he had blessed her with, even if it was a little. She knew that everything she had belonged to God anyway. This woman didn't give financially to feel good about herself or to draw attention and go, look at me, look what I did, look how great I am. She didn't allow not having anything be an excuse for not giving anything. She didn't allow not having anything be an excuse for not giving anything, because giving is from the heart. It's an internal exercise. But instead, right, she takes these coins, her fingers held onto them so tightly, and she lets them go with a joyful and giving heart. And Jesus looks at that and goes, that is what we want. That is what we're after. Because giving is more internal than it is external. When we give, what we offer is not estimated by the value, but by the heart and spirit of which it's given. So questions for you to think about today are, well, am I giving, first off, but how are you giving? How's your heart? What's your motivation? Are you worried about how it will make you feel or look? Are you worried that if you give, then maybe it'll be all you have? It's an internal exercise. It's a faith exercise. That's why it matters how we give, not how much we give. Number 2, giving involves sacrifice. Giving involves sacrifice. This woman sacrificed a lot to give up these 2 coins. She didn't just let go of 2 random coins that she found on the ground. Chances are she let go of the only money she had, trusting that God would take care of her for the rest. Where in contrast, we look at the rich people, and they were giving out of surplus amount. They had a lot of money and thought, well, I can spare some over here, and I can spare some over here, and I can spare some over here. They probably didn't even recognize it was gone. They weren't sacrificing anything but the widow. Her giving and letting go of what she was, and that what she had was a huge sacrifice. She would feel it. She would recognize that it was gone. We get this backwards a lot. We think that, hey, I have all this extra money, so now I can start giving it away. I have all this extra time, so now I can start serving and volunteering and just like being present in the lives of those around me and helping those in need, making time for people. I have all this extra this. I have all this extra that. Does anybody need it? But what if we looked at what we had and thought, what can I give out of this? This is what the Bible calls us to do. We should be sacrificing something when we are giving. We should be giving something up. We don't just give out of surplus. We give from whatever we have. Now, please hear me, okay? I am not telling you to give away everything you have and live on the street in a box so you can give to others and give to the church and not care about yourself. No. I'm not saying just start throwing your money at literally every single person you see that needs help. No, we're called to be good stewards. We're called to be responsible with our time. We're called to have wisdom in finances. What I am saying is that when we give, we should recognize that it has costed us something. Doesn't have to be a huge cost, but it has to be a cost. That means maybe if you give financially, you maybe go out to eat once a week instead of twice. Maybe you buy one pair of shoes instead of two. Maybe you watch TV for 30 minutes instead of an hour so you can go and do something else. Giving involves sacrifice. Being compelled by the gospel, that word means the good news of Jesus Christ. Being compelled by that is countercultural and crazy to the world. As Christians, God calls us to many things that don't really make sense to us, don't really make sense to the outside looking in. We have to get used to that. We get that. But giving is one of those things. Giving generously is the very opposite of what our society tells us to do, because our time, our money, our resources, those are ours. But if we follow Jesus, our life belongs to Him, and there's so much joy in that. And we recognize that He's blessed us with all those things. They're His anyway. So we give our time in serving our families and neighbors and communities and churches. At Starting Line, we give our time by getting involved in the partnerships we have here, like with the preschool and kindergarten school in North Ridgeville. We regularly give money to missions and organizations, to church, and to helping those in need in our lives. All these things are what God calls us to do, not every now and then, but as a constant rhythm. Because we believe that when we become givers, we will actually see more of Jesus working in our lives in ways that we may not expect. Each week of the series, we've taken some time to practice the rhythm that we've talked about. And what I have for you today to do is a challenge. We have a challenge for you this Thanksgiving week. We want you to find some way to bless somebody else through financial means in the next 7 to 10 days. In the next week and a half, we want you to find some way to bless somebody financially. It could be leaving a bigger tip at a restaurant. It could be buying coffee for the car behind you, bringing a dozen donuts to work. It could be giving more to church than maybe you normally do, cooking someone dinner, buying someone a gift who's maybe going through a really hard time. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could cost you $1. But make sure it costs you something. And if possible, try to do it in a way that you don't receive any credit. Yes, I get it. If you cook someone dinner, you should probably tell them so they're not confused why a random meal is sitting on their doorstep. But if there's a way you can do it without the person knowing, take that route instead. So that's your challenge from us. We believe that God's called us to be givers, and we want to lean into that as a rhythm of our lives. So as we close our service, one of the ways we worship is through giving. We've talked about this all day. So we want to give you an opportunity to give financially to Starting Line, to be able to allow us to continue to do the ministry that God has called us to do. So if you would like to do that, you can do that online, through the mail, in person at our gatherings at the Hub. We love you. We hope you have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. Go bless somebody this week in a really, really special way. We love you. We'll see you next week.